We're coming on the air this 4th of July with President Trump getting ready to sign his mega bill into law. We'll bring you the moment live from the White House with a team of reporters standing by to break it down and tell us what it means for you. Plus, biblical flooding sweeping across central Texas. At least 6 are dead and about 20 children missing after a camp was basically washed away. The urgent rescue mission and what we're just learning from officials there. Then a fast-moving California wildfire exploding in size. It is now the biggest the state's seen this season. Why it's been tough for firefighters to contain. And the Dalai Lama's final showdown. We'll bring you in-depth reporting on his fight with Beijing over his successor and reincarnation. Then finally, smooth sailing or travel nightmare. How things are shaping up in the in the air rather, and on the roads this 4th of July. Hey there, I'm Ellison Barber in for Hallie. And any minute now, President Trump is set to sign his sweeping domestic policy agenda into law at the White House's July 4th picnic. Here's a live look at the scene. We're going to keep an eye on it and bring you the moment it happens live. This legislation, also known as the Big Beautiful Bill, will dramatically transform fiscal and policy priorities of the United States moving forward on everything from health care to immigration enforcement to taxes. Here are a few examples of how it's set to change things. It's going to make most of the president's 2017 tax cuts permanent, and it'll end taxes on tips. It'll also cut down government spending by putting new work requirements on people who get Medicaid and food stamps. It'll end tax credits for people who buy electric cars or put energy-efficient heating and cooling systems in their homes. We have team coverage for you. Julie Sirkin is standing by with the latest from Capitol Hill. But we're going to begin with Kelly O'Donnell at the White House there. Kelly, the president, we are expecting to use this bill signing as sort of a victory lap, right? I mean, this was a narrow win for him in terms of it passing the Senate. We saw Vice President J.D. Vance be the tiebreaker vote. What do we expect to see and hear today?
Well, certainly I expect the president will do some of what we saw him do in Iowa last night, which is his first chance where he was able to be out among the public and talk about promises that he made as a candidate and delivering on those promises. He set July 4th as the deadline. That deadline has been realized. There are no Democrats that supported this, and there were a few Republicans who did not back him, but the president was able to use considerable sway over his own party to get this mammoth bill through. There will be significant changes in some people's lives, and there will be an extension, as you said, of the 2017 tax cuts that were a big part of his first administration, and some changes along all of that. It's a big bill, nearly 1,000 pages, and there are a lot of moments of fine print. So when you're talking about no tax on tips, there are requirements attached to that, certain job descriptions that are permitted. There are income limits, and it's not that anyone who gets a tip can consider that deductible, but it will make a big difference for a lot of people who see a chunk of their income coming in through tips, things like waiters and waitresses and so forth. So that will be significant. There are some benefits for seniors with some limited deductions related to Social Security, where they get a credit for some of that. They could not do a straight out no tax on Social Security, which was one of the things he promised. That didn't work out in this bill. But there's also been a lot of focus on what could be harmful to working Americans, and that would be changes to safety net programs like Medicaid, where there would be work requirements, where there is an expectation of cuts to the program overall. That could affect rural hospitals and things like food assistance known as SNAP. So there will be a lot of things for people to adjust to as this very sprawling law goes into effect over a period of time. But for now, the president will use the holiday and the fireworks associated with the 4th of July as a way to tout what he and his party were able to get across the finish line. Ellison?
And Julie, Kelly touched on it there. No Democrats supported this bill. A few Republicans did not, but we saw President Trump using a lot of his personal sway to get a lot of those Republicans there to narrowly pass this bill. Talk to us about what you have been hearing on Capitol Hill, both from lawmakers as well as your sources.
Well, today, I don't think any Republican lawmaker wants to hear or talk to reporters because they pulled multiple all-nighters to try and muscle this bill through, and also because, as Kelly touched, they don't really want to be asked or talk about some of the provisions in this bill that are frankly unpopular, and they're provisions that Democrats will use to campaign against them. But what we are going to see going forward, according to the sources that I spoke to on the Republican side of the aisle, is messaging on the smaller parts of this bill, the provisions in this bill that do poll well, including actually those work requirements, adding those to Medicaid and food stamp benefits, not talking about the other parts that are going to cut, especially access to health care to those underserved communities, but touting the making permanent the 2017 tax cuts. Of course, without doing so, even middle-class families would have seen some pain in their wallet with their taxes going back up. So that's certainly something they're going to emphasize. You're going to hear Republican lawmakers talk about no tax on tips and overtimes and no tax on car loans. These are key provisions that I'm told sources are trying to tell Republicans, especially those that are campaigning and are up for re-election in 2026, to focus on, not the big picture and some of those stickier provisions that are going to be tough for them to defend at the ballot box, Allison. But so far this weekend, they are obviously not interested and looking to answer the phones when it comes to this bill, because, of course, they want to get that break after pulling multiple all-nighters and record vote-a-ramas to get this bill through the Senate and the House.
Kelly, take us behind the scenes a little bit, if you can, here, as we're watching these images. I mean, it's a grand setup. It's not the first time we've seen President Trump sign a bill in a public fashion, not the first time we've seen any president do that. But is there anything that you're seeing on the ground there, or anything about the feeling of today that is different or abnormal than how we've seen past presidents, or even Donald Trump in his first term, handle signing bills?
Well, certainly the president is entitled to have a ceremony attached to signing a bill. It is a political victory anytime a president of either party achieves some aim. And so that is not unusual. What is unusual is that he set the timing to merge, in effect, this event, signing a bill, with what is supposed to be a non-political, apolitical event, and that is celebrating the 4th of July. Every year, and I've been here for a lot of them, there is a party on the South Lawn. It is usually includes military families from around the region and around the country who are invited to participate for a barbecue and a party with the fireworks visible later tonight, with music, really a fun celebration of the nation's independence. That is supposed to not be about politics, but about what binds us all together and the history of the nation. President Trump tends to run up against and cross right over a lot of those lines that have been traditional, have been norms. And he tends to want to make any of these moments a way to reflect sort of his version of the presidency. So that's part of what we'll see tonight. We also expect that the president, because he is touting some of his achievements, that includes what he considers a successful military operation against Iran and its nuclear program just a couple of weeks ago, that they have invited members of the military who were a part of the various steps of that operation, from pilots to mechanics to support staff, inviting those who would be able to attend to come to the party tonight with family members to celebrate the 4th of July, and as a way to honor them for their service. So it has a mix of that as well. We expect a flyover to happen tonight. The president loves that kind of big display of American might, and that will be part of it. So it really is, what stands out most is that this is mixing the work of the presidency, signing a bill into law, with sort of the cultural aspects of the White House celebrating a holiday like the 4th of July.
And Julie, as we're waiting to hear the president, I think we are expecting to hear from him any minute now. But could you take us inside what's going to be happening on the Hill? Traditionally, on the 4th of July, whenever there are the fireworks on the Mall, you see a lot of lawmakers, including the president at times, coming and participating in all of those festivities. In terms of Republicans and or Democrats, do we know if anyone from Capitol Hill is going to be over there in time for this signing? And if so, can you give us a sense of who we could see?
Yeah, I'm certain a couple of lawmakers, certainly Republicans, want to stand behind the president and stand with him as they celebrate the signing of this bill into law. You got a preview of that from House Speaker Mike Johnson yesterday doing an enrollment ceremony up on Capitol Hill. It was sort of grand. Almost every single Republican crowded around him to sign this bill on the Hill before it made its way to the president's desk for signature. But this kind of fanfare that Kelly is alluding to is something that we've expected for the last several months, since they set this, frankly, arbitrary deadline of July 4th to get this bill signed into law. There was no other reason to do so other than the president wanted the optics of the fireworks, of the celebration of America's 249th birthday in concert with this bill that is really the cornerstone of his second term. It is extremely clear that he is never going to have a situation, because of the slim majorities in the House and Senate already, where he is able to corral the votes and corral the members to get something as big as this through. And it really does make a lot of his campaign promises. It really follows through on a lot of his campaign promises. And for that, of course, he had to do a lot of convincing to get Republicans on board, especially we talk about those moderates and the Medicaid cuts and everything it took to get their votes for this bill, but also those hardline conservatives, people who went into this process with the promise that the deficit was going to be slashed. That did not happen in this piece of legislation. In fact, the reason we are looking at such steep cuts to social safety net programs is to help pay for those tax cuts, to pay for border and immigration enforcement, to pay for the military adds to the defense that the president wants. All of this is sort of tied together in the president's mind of this July 4th celebration, as Kelly was talking about, and the signing of this big, beautiful bill into law. I will tell you, though, many lawmakers are actually back home with their families, I know, including some members of leadership, because they were working day and night, hour by hour, keeping the votes open on the floor for historic record-breaking times to get this bill actually muscled through. It took so much pressure to get this done. And I think for those reasons, you might see a little bit less lawmakers than we're used to in this July 4th celebration this year.
Kelly, let me come back to you for a minute. And I know we're going to probably have to let you go soon, and hopefully we will also start hearing from the president in the minutes ahead. But pick up a little bit on what Julie touched on, this idea that a lot of people voted for the president expecting under his administration to see the deficit significantly slashed. This is a bill that will raise the debt ceiling. It is also, by some projections, expected to raise the national deficit in the next 10 years by trillions of dollars. Talk to us about that. And in terms of the president's base, is that something that polling has suggested they're okay with in favor of other things that they support within this bill?
Well, within the MAGA base, there are certainly those who are very strongly concerned about the deficit. As you point out, this, according to the Congressional Budget Office, which is a nonpartisan sort of the math of the Capitol, where they always give an assessment of what does legislation cost and what does it do to the deficit. They're projecting $3.3 trillion over the next 10 years. Now, conservatives and lawmakers in the Republican Party are quick to point out that the CBO sets a growth, a projected economic growth, at a level that is less than 2%, and they believe that the policies that are in this law will spur economic activity and growth beyond that, and therefore will bring in more tax revenue that would bring down the deficit. You know, the math is mathing. People will find statistics that support their point of view. Part of what is happening here is that the president has never really been all that focused on spending caps. The president wants to be able to provide to, especially his base, but the country broadly, continuation, as he often talks about, of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. He has specifically and explicitly said there would not be cuts to Medicaid, and there are. So the president would acknowledge that. I'm not sure how eager he would be to acknowledge, but there are some areas where there could be an impact on workers. And part of what the Republican Party says is they are trying to create reforms that would strengthen a program like Medicaid by having work requirements and by trying to have a stricter definition of who can have access to that program so it would continue. Part of what really is emblematic of this whole day is that the scope of this bill, everything from tax policy to border enforcement to all these changes we're talking about in health care, those could all be done as separate kinds of bills if the president and the Republican team had wanted to pursue it that way. But they used a particular type of legislative technique that allowed them in a budget construct to have a bill that could pass by a simple majority. There are limitations to how you can do that, but it kind of had a kitchen sink quality where they were putting in many, many, many elements to try to get it all through with one bill. It was the president's preference that it would be one massive bill and not a series of legislative attempts or achievements. And so that's where the name One Big Beautiful came from. The president, who likes to coin phrases like that, named it that. It became the official name of the bill, and now act, because bill becomes an act when it is signed by the president. And so that's part of why it's so huge. And to some degree, that allows for picking and choosing in how people talk about the bill. They'll find things they like about it. They'll find things they don't like about it. It's just so overwhelming in scope, it's hard for people to grasp all of it. And that, in some ways, very much fits the Trump era, that he likes big, bold strokes. And that's part of what we're seeing play out with this legislation.
And Julie, as we think about this in the context of being such a big, broad bill, as we get closer to likely seeing the president here, can you give us what you have heard from Capitol Hill in terms of people who supported this bill? What are the top two most common things that lawmakers say, this is why we believe this is good for the United States and the future of this country and the people who live in it? And what are the top one or two things that you hear from opponents who say this and this is why this is going to be negative for this country and the future of this country and the people and the economics moving forward?
Yeah, well, it's such a good question, Ellison. And as Kelly laid out, it is a beautiful big bill by design. It's not clear that the president could get any parts of this bill through without combining it in one big package, as we watch, of course, the flyover happen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and First Lady Melania Trump.
And we are watching here as the doors open and the president and the first lady come out. You just saw a series of B-2 bombers flying over the White House there, and we are hearing the introduction for the president of the United States now.
Ladies and gentlemen, Master Gunnery Sergeant Kevin Benier, accompanied by the President's own United States Marine Band, will now honor America with the singing of our national anthem, followed by a flyover consisting of a B-2 Spirit bomber from Whiteman Air Force Base, escorted by 2 F-35 fighters in honor of all our military personnel who participated in Operation Midnight Hammer and who are currently serving both home and abroad, protecting our nation's freedom.
Still
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and First Lady Melania Trump.
Well, thank you very much, and that is some sight, especially after what happened just a week ago. When you look at that big, beautiful plane, and the other ones were something. It was an incredible mission, and I think I can say very proudly, and I don't have to quote the polls, that our country is more proud right now than it's been in many, many years. We have pride, we have dignity, we have something that's happened miraculously so fast. You know that our military now is the most sought-after job there's ever been, serving in our military. 1 year ago, people didn't want to join our military. They didn't want to join our police, our firefighters. They didn't want to join anything having to do with our country. And now, as you probably know, the enlistment is at an all-time record. We're packed. We're full. And I just think that's so important because that was so sad 1 year ago when I heard those statistics. We had a different president, but nobody wanted to join, and now we're at a record. And I will say that I just left NATO, where we had a tremendous experience. They've agreed to put up over $1 trillion a year. They went from less than 2% to 5%, and nobody thought that was possible. And they told me very strongly, the leaders of a big part of the world, very respected people all, they told me that, 1 year ago, your country was dead, and now you have the hottest country anywhere in the world. So that's the way it is, and that's the way we like it. And it's only going to get hotter. I promise you that. After that spectacular display of American power, let me just say that God bless the United States military, and God bless the USA. God bless the USA. And to all Americans, I want to wish you a very happy Independence Day, happy 4th of July. This is going to be something special. This spirit in this country, we haven't seen anything like it in many, many years and decades. Let me also express our gratitude to our magnificent First Lady. She worked very hard to make this all work. And we have a fireworks display about 9 o'clock tonight. I hope you're all going to be around and watch it. I know our congressmen and our senators who are standing right here, so many of them, they did such a great job. They're going to be here. I guarantee you, they're not leaving. They're not leaving. Thanks as well to the National Park Service, the USO, and countless friends and distinguished guests. We have so many people in the audience that have so much to do with the success of our country. We've, I think, had probably the most successful almost 6 months as a president and the presidency. I think they're saying it was the best 6 months, and I know for a fact they're saying the last 2 weeks there has never been anything like it as far as winning. So as you know, 2 weeks ago, our incredible Air Force pilots conducted one of the most successful military strikes in all of history, Operation Midnight Hammer, and that's exactly what it was. It was a hammer. This evening, we're honored to be joined by 150 airmen and their families from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, home of the B-2 bomber. And we've kept them a little bit on guard. We kept them a little bit, let's be a little bit quiet about it. But if you want to raise your hand very quickly, raise your hand, because you people are just incredible. They don't want to be in disguise. They say, we don't have to do that. They're looking at us like we're a bunch of babies. We don't have to be in disguise. We saw all those hands go up. Thank you very much. We owe you everything. Great job. Incredible. Just flawless. One of the most flawless military campaigns in the history of our country. If you remember years ago, they had helicopters crashing into each other. It was a disaster, the hostages in Iran. And we had just the opposite. We didn't have any crashes. We didn't lose any planes. We didn't lose anybody. Those beautiful planes that you saw were totally stealth. They flew right over the center of a very hostile country. and they never even saw it coming. And then they said, skedaddle. They dropped the bombs. They said, skedaddle. And that big sucker turned over like this on its side, and it got out of there. Well, I'll tell you what, how they do that, but they can do it. I asked our great General Kane, how do they do that? Do they really love doing that? Look at them, they're all laughing. And they said, do they really like doing it, sir? They can't wait. Better you than me. That's all I can say. It was a flawless mission. Every single bomb hit, and it was total obliteration, total obliteration. Now, even the fake news is admitting that. They hated to admit it, but they had no choice. That was an incredible thing, and these heroic pilots showed our enemies what it means to fly, fight, and win. To every service member who supported that mission, and we have many of them here, we've made we've made you proud by supporting, but you've made us even prouder by having the courage to get in those gorgeous machines and fly through the roughest airspace anywhere in the world. And we salute you and we honor you. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you. And we're also honored and delighted to be joined by hundreds of service members and military families. Those families are the best we have, from all across the U.S. Armed Forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, Space Force. I love the Space Force. You know why? Because we're the ones that did it. It's turned out to be a very invaluable force, actually. The Coast Guard and the Marines are incredible people. On behalf of our entire nation, this 4th of July, we thank you for keeping America safe, strong, sovereign, and free. Thank you very much for being here. Great honor. And stick around for the fireworks. And our country's had so much to celebrate this Independence Day. As we enter our 249th year, America is winning, winning, winning like never before. We're not, I'll tell you, we're in a category now that's where we've wanted to be for a long time. We suffered with 4 horrible years of embarrassment. Afghanistan may be the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. We're never going to let a thing like that happen again. Trillions of dollars are pouring into the United States for investment purposes. Almost $15 trillion. There's never been anything like it. There's never been anything even close. The stock market's at an all-time high. Jobs are at an all-time high. Everything's at an all-time high, and we're going to keep it that way. We have the greatest country in the world, and we're back. We're back like nobody thought possible this quickly. I thought it would take maybe a year, maybe 2 years, maybe even 3. And we did it in less than 6 months. We are back and strong. We've restored American strength and deterrence on the world stage. We're respected again. The world is respecting us again. When we did NATO, those leaders came up to me and they said, you know what, we're going to go to a new level of spending because you're requesting it, sir. They didn't talk to you last president like that, I can tell you. They didn't spend any money. They didn't spend anything. In a few moments, we're going to make official the greatest victory yet when I signed the one big, beautiful bill. And before I start, I want to tell you that I've never seen people so happy in our country because of that, because so many different groups of people are being taken care of, the military.
And we have been listening to President Trump there. He is about to sign his mega bill into law. We're going to bring that to you as soon as it happens. But for now, let's get to some of our other big stories tonight as we wait for him to sign that bill officially, because right now, devastating and deadly flash flooding is sweeping through central Texas, with at least 20 children missing from a summer camp in the area. That camp saying that they have been hit with catastrophic damage. They say they do not have power, Wi-Fi, or water. And again, at least 20 campers are believed to be missing right now. It's all happening about 2 hours west of Austin, Texas. Just in the last couple of hours, you see some of the images here. A car swept up in the floodwaters. Local authorities say at least 13 people in all have died. Here's what officials have said so far.
Suffice it to say, this has been a very devastating and deadly flood.
According to the National Weather Service, the river rose from 7 feet to over 29 by 4 in the morning. There are a lot of questions about how this took the area by surprise. But for now, let's bring in meteorologist Bill Cairns for the latest. Bill, explain to us where things are now and big picture. How did this flooding event in Texas happen?
Yeah, so unusual, and the timing, just the way everything came together is just a nightmare. Going into the holiday, thunderstorm in the middle of the night in hilly terrain, and we got campers on the river. We got all these camps with kids at them on the river too. So here's the radar that went through 10 p.m. last night to 10 a.m. this morning, and you could just see it just sat here, all this heavy rain. And we talk about the Texas hill country. It's not like the mountains in the Rockies or in the Appalachians, but there are hills, and so that water will rush down the hills and collect in the smaller streams. Then it all combines, and it all went into the Guadalupe River. The highest rainfall total I saw was over 17 inches in the last 24 hours. One location just outside of San Angelo had 14 inches. Everywhere with the brown here is up to 7 inches. So in other words, it wasn't just like one little spot. It was a huge footprint with an extreme amount of rain. So this is the Guadalupe River, and then the crest in Kerrville, which was the first really hard-hit area, that was about at 9 a.m. The crest in Comfort was at 10 a.m. Now that crest, this wall of water is still going down the river. We're just not hearing about it because this is a relatively unpopulated area. They've evacuated everyone and all the campers on the river. Tonight into tomorrow morning, it'll all dump into Canyon Lake. Thankfully, Canyon Lake has a big dam on it. It's a large body of water. It's down about 30 feet, so it'll be able to absorb this rush of water. So they're saying that the dam will be safe. So we'll update that tomorrow, of course, as it happens. But I want to point out what it felt like, what it looked like to these people. In Comfort, Texas, the river was at 3 feet at 9 a.m. At 10 a.m., the river was up to 32 feet. It rose 29 feet in 1 hour. So that is 1 foot every 2 minutes. So if you're woken up in the middle of the night in the water, and it's not just like water, there's like logs, there's debris all in the water that's rushing through. So you can see why this has devastated and taken so many lives already, and that number is going to jump. This was the 5th highest that's ever been measured, the river also. So it wasn't just a fast-moving, rushing wall. It was also extremely tall, too. And unfortunately, we still got more rain in the forecast. This is over the last 3 hours. This is Kerrville, Comfort's like here. It's just light rain right now. But we do think we're going to have another batch of very heavy rain later on tonight. That's why the flood watch is issued, and rainfall estimates are another 3 to 4 inches. Allison, will anything repeat like happened? No way. But it will make the search and rescue that much more difficult. When they're saying that they're still taking people out of trees, it just kind of lets you know what the situation is like.
Yeah, tough few days, probably weeks ahead for that community. Our thoughts are with them as they weather it right now. Bill Cairns, thank you. A wildfire in California's San Luis Obispo County exploding to more than 70,000 acres, forcing the evacuation of hundreds of homes. They're calling it the Madre Fire. It started on Wednesday in a rural area just 2 hours north of Los Angeles. It's California's biggest fire so far this year in an area with ranch land and lots of grass providing fuel during California's hot and dry summer months. Air tankers and ground crews trying to get control of the blaze. Officials with CAL FIRE say it's about 10% contained as of now. The cause of the fire itself still under investigation. A record number of Americans are hitting the roads and the skies tonight, with over 72 million people set to travel this weekend, marking the busiest 4th of July weekend for travel in about 15 years. Let's bring in NBC's Marquise Francis from New York City. Marquise, let's talk about this record travel and what kinds of scenes it's creating at airports and highways across the country. What have you been seeing?
Yeah, Ellison, it seems as though everyone wants to go somewhere this holiday week, whether it's by car, by boat, or by plane. And of course, we're seeing that play out with cars and traffic packed on the roads and, of course, packed airports as well. And just to put this into perspective, I want to pull up a full screen because, as you know, the AAA projects 72 million people to be traveling this holiday week, which started last Saturday and extends through this Sunday, July 6th. And also, as you see on the screen, there's over 300,000 flights, which makes this the busiest time for July 4th in 15 years. But of course, Ellison, you and I don't have to worry about that because we're at work on July 4th, but for a lot of people, there's a lot of headaches out there as they're trying to travel.
You know, in some ways, Marquise, our bosses did us a solid, right? They saved us from a little bit of stress and a headache, I guess. Let's look ahead while we have you. What do people need to know, or what should they expect when they're coming back home, right? Sometimes that can be worse than it is getting out. How bad do experts say it could get?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as that 72 million for AAA, 62 million of them, people are actually traveling by car, another 5 million by plane, and another 5 million by other modes of transportation. That's cruises, buses, and trains, of course. Now, as far as just getting to where they need to go to, there are best times and worst times to travel. AAA suggests that anywhere between 11 and 12 o'clock, all the way to 6 o'clock, are actually the worst times to travel. Of course, people are traveling, get on the road, summer camp is getting out, people are traveling from work, but the best time is actually before 11 a.m. And so I think it's a mix of patience and strategy, and just understand that sometimes you just got to wait it out a little bit. Ellison?
Marquise Francis in New York, thank you. Now to the Middle East, where Hamas says it is, quote, fully prepared to enter negotiations in terms of Gaza. This development coming as President Trump making calls with the leaders of two other warring nations. The president today speaking with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky for the first time since the United States paused the delivery of weapons to Ukraine. That call comes after Mr. Trump's call with Russian President Vladimir Putin about working towards a potential ceasefire in the Russia-Ukraine war. But President Trump says he, quote, didn't make any progress on a ceasefire.
Yeah, I'm very disappointed with the conversation I had today with President Putin, because I don't think he's there. I don't think he's there. And I'm very disappointed.
All of this coming as Russian forces unleashed a barrage of airstrikes in northeastern Ukraine, including on the capital city, Kyiv. It's said to be the biggest air attack of the war thus far. NBC's Raf Sanchez is joining us with the latest. Raf, we've got these intensifying attacks. President Trump saying he did not make progress with President Putin in terms of a ceasefire. Put it in context for us. What does it mean for the prospect of peace?
Well, Allison, every indication we have is that these ceasefire talks are really going nowhere. And President Trump seems to be acknowledging that. You heard the frustration in his voice as he spoke to reporters last night after that hour-long phone call with President Putin. And he said, this is going nowhere. I made no progress with him at all today. It is unusual to hear President Trump criticizing the Russian leader so openly, giving voice to this frustration. But the Kremlin is saying that they will achieve their war aims, either through force or diplomacy. So from the Russian position, they feel like they are making progress on the battlefield. They are producing enough drones to carry out these massive, almost nightly strikes on Kyiv. Some 500 drones launched at the Ukrainian capital last night. So there really, at this point, is very little to point to in terms of progress on these ceasefire talks. Elsa?
And Raf, Ukrainian President Zelensky, President Trump, they were supposed to meet at the G7 in Canada last month. But as most people remember, President Trump left before that meeting, in part because of the situation that was going on between Israel and Iran. There was also that incredibly contentious Oval Office meeting back in February. What do we know about the relationship between those two leaders today? Are they regularly communicating? Is it cordial?
So the words are certainly a lot warmer than they were back in February, when you'll remember President Trump, Vice President Vance berating the Ukrainian leader in front of the world's media in the Oval Office. They did speak earlier today. We only have the Ukrainian readout of that conversation. Zelensky says it was a warm conversation. He says President Trump's extremely well informed about what's going on in Ukraine and that the two sides agreed to strengthen Ukraine's air defenses. We're waiting to see what that means from the White House. In terms of actions, though, there isn't a whole lot of warmth to point to. The Trump administration paused shipments of some weapons systems to the Ukrainians earlier. Among those systems, those Patriot interceptor missiles, which the Ukrainians say they so badly need to defend their skies against Russian attacks. And we are also not seeing President Trump following through on his frustration with the Russians with actions. The Ukrainians are hoping that there will be sanctions on Russia for refusing to come to the negotiating table. They're hoping for more weapons, not fewer. And yet at this point, that is not happening. Alison.
NBC's Raf Sanchez, excellent reporting. Thank you. And coming up, President Trump speaking now before signing his mega bill into law. We are keeping an eye on it, and we'll bring it to you as soon as it happens. Stay right there. We'll be right back. Tonight, a showdown between the Dalai Lama and China is escalating over who his successor will be. The Dalai Lama turns 90 this weekend, and traditionally, the Dalai Lama handpicks their own replacements. But China has other plans. They say they have already found the next Dalai Lama, and it's generating a ton of controversy. NBC's Janice Mackey-Freyer has more.
For years, the question has lingered around the 14th Dalai Lama about what happens after his death. Whether the spiritual leader would even have a successor, and importantly, who will decide it. So with his 90th birthday approaching, followers of Tibetan Buddhism have been anxious to hear his crucial truth. In a video message in India, where he's lived in exile since 1959, the Dalai Lama declared that they will have another leader. I am affirming that the institution of the Dalai Lama will continue, he said, saying the trust he founded has the sole authority to recognize the future reincarnation. That last part about authority was more of a message to China, which has been locked in a long and bitter feud over control.
We're going to pause right here because President Trump is making his way down to sign his mega bill, the one that he refers to as the big, beautiful bill. Let's go ahead and listen in as he formally signs this here with the First Lady Melania Trump by his side.
President, this is the gavel we use to enact the big, beautiful bill, and I want you to have that for your
Are we ready?
We're ready.
Are we ready? Good. Have a good time.
All right, President Trump there has officially signed what he refers to as the big, beautiful bill into law at the White House there. You see some lawmakers from Capitol Hill behind him, including House Speaker Mike Johnson. He handed the president a gavel saying this is what we use to enact it. We saw the president there saying, are we ready? Are we ready? Before he hammered that gavel after signing it. We also can see Majority Leader Steve Scalise behind him there. Let's bring in Julie Sirkin from Capitol Hill and Kelly O'Donnell from the White House for more as we watch this. Kelly, if you're there, let me bring you in here and just get your reaction to this moment and what we have seen thus far today. The ceremony in some ways started different than we often see when it comes to bill signings. We saw a flyover over the White House. The president spoke at length about the mission that was carried out to target nuclear sites in Iran, calling it a flawless mission, pointing out that people who had been a part of that mission from the United States Air Force were there in the crowd that day, then transitioning to talk about this bill, which is a massive piece of legislation, 1,000 pages that will fundamentally reshape the United States fiscal as well as general policies moving forward. Walk us through what you have seen today and the big points you think people should remember.
It is very much a vivid day of celebration for the patriotism associated with the holiday and certainly politically for the president. You mentioned the flyover. It is always stirring to experience one of those here in Washington, even from the North Lawn here when the pilots flew overhead. There is a rumble that everyone can feel, and it's certainly adding to the excitement. And when you add to it that there is a storyline connecting this to the mission in Iran, you get a sense of why the president felt it was so important to highlight that. When it comes to the bill itself and the signing of the legislation, part of what you see there are the people who worked very hard on it, those Republicans who can be in town, who are in cycle, some of them, who want to be associated with the president for all the benefits that come politically among their voters. Certainly Democrats will view these same events and be able to take from it things they will use in the midterm elections. You heard the president referencing the midterm elections. The president also made some very sweeping comments about what's in the bill that don't all stand up to accuracy. They did not eliminate the estate tax. They increased it and extended it, but it is not eliminated. There is not tax-free Social Security. There are restrictions with a limited kind of I'm going to call it a deduction, but it's even more complex than that. And so, as the president often does, he will speak about things in very broad ways and selling it, if you will. The facts are important. It's not limitless tax-free overtime or also tips. But there will be many Americans who will benefit from that. And there will also be Americans who will see things get harder for them with restrictions to how they could qualify for Medicaid. If they've been on that program, there will be requirements for work. There will be other limitations to how much money the program has to carry out its various missions, from nursing homes to helping people with disabilities, et cetera. And so there is so much in this bill, it's easy to make it a laundry list and not be able to go into all of the critical details. Much of that will play out going forward, especially in the campaign context, when Republicans will be pressed to defend it and Democrats will look for lots of ways to exploit cuts that are made here and to highlight that they believe that this will disproportionately affect working class Americans in ways that will not be helpful. So certainly for now, the president is in the mood of a holiday celebration, a warm summer day here in Washington. And there will be a party happening on the lawn all night through the fireworks at around 9 o'clock tonight. So this crowd that is here, which includes military families, invited guests, and so forth, they will be enjoying, summer fare and a great atmosphere. But the substance of what happened here is a legitimate achievement for the president on legislation he championed and worked hard to secure, and then questions going forward about what its real-world impacts will be.
Kelly O'Donnell at the White House, thank you. Julie, let's come to you and talk about the impacts on Capitol Hill. As we touched on before, this is something that narrowly passed the Senate, 51-50. Vice President J.D. Vance was the tiebreaker vote. In terms of what happens next on Capitol Hill, for the people who were against this, in large part Democrats, we had a few Republicans who were opposed to it as well. What do they do next? Is this something that is only dealt with on the campaign trail, or do they possibly have measures or actions they plan to try and take to circumvent or negate or balance out, if you will, some of the things that they were opposed to? And for the people who did support this and worked so hard to pass it, are they in a celebration mode moving forward, or is there more work for them to do as well?
They are absolutely in a celebration mode, and it's so interesting to see who is around the president. That's what I was kind of keeping my eye on, because you have the House Republican leadership team flanking him here, namely Speaker Johnson, as you mentioned, handing him that gavel that they use, the president hitting it on that desk. I also thought it was fascinating to see who was there and who wasn't there from the Senate side. You had the people involved who really crafted this package. Mike Crapo, who's the finance chairman, Lindsey Graham, who's the budget chairman. It's also interesting to see some senators there who actually had a hand in taking some provisions out. Marsha Blackburn, for example, who is one of the last people that the president gave a hug to. She's running for governor in Tennessee, not seeking re-election in the Senate. She is the reason that AI moratorium prohibiting states from kind of making their own rules of the road for artificial intelligence, she's the reason that was struck out of the bill. She had a hand there. Steve Daines, I saw him standing there. He's somebody who fought to get public land provisions taken out of the bill, making sure that there was no changes made that would impact and harm public lands. Of course, he represents the state of Montana. So you had all these people around him who had a hand in crafting this bill. I thought it was notable that you saw one New York Republican standing behind him, Malliotakis, the congresswoman right there behind him. You see him on your screen right over his shoulder with the brown hair. She represents the Staten Island area, and she's notable because she was not one of the Republicans from blue states who was fighting to get an even higher deduction on the state and local tax deduction cap. She was fine with it the entire way through. It was some of the other Republicans in that state who didn't feel as comfortable, who pushed that cap to go higher to $40,000 a year. So families there who get taxed high on their property and state taxes can then write them off when they're doing their federal taxes. Clearly an important provision for them. But who you don't see are those moderates who are going to have to work extra hard to message this bill, to be able to keep their seats, whether it's in the House and the Senate, who are going to have to, even if they voted for this bill, work extra hard to try and circumvent some of the inevitable attacks that you're going to hear and see from Democrats over the next 18 months, specifically when it comes to pointing out those steep cuts to social safety net programs, the steep cuts to Medicaid. And I thought it was notable, and Kelly touched on this, what you saw from the president today is the playbook that you're going to see from these Republicans going forward. They are not going to be talking about this bill in broad strokes. They are not going to be getting into every single provision and talking about how good or bad it is on the macro level, the nearly 1,000 pages that consist inside of it. They are going to be pulling out specifically the provisions that pull well for them and that are wins for them, ignoring effectively some of the unpopular pieces that they hope voters will ignore at the ballot box, too.
All right, NBC's Julie Sirkin, excellent context. Thank you for bearing with us and breaking all of that down. We appreciate you. Before we wrap today, let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about. Number 1, take a look at what is left of this gas station in Rome after a massive explosion. At least 45 people hurt, according to Italian news agencies. Officials are investigating, but say a gas leak at the station might have triggered the explosion. Number 2, former Arsenal soccer player Thomas Partey has been charged with rape and sexual assault. It's in connection to incidents with 3 separate women in 2021 and 2022. Partey's lawyer says he denies all of the charges and welcomes the opportunity to clear his name. He's due in court in August. Number 3, Los Angeles is cracking down on a new kind of tourism. Apparently, busloads of so-called disaster tourists have been taking tours through the Pacific Palisades, where those deadly fires decimated neighborhoods at the beginning of the year. Now, LA's City Council has voted to stop tour buses from going into areas considered part of a national disaster emergency. One council member called those tours dangerous and exploitative. Number 4, for the first time in over 100 years, you can take a dip in the Seine. That's right, the long-polluted river is finally open for swimmers after France poured over $1 billion into cleaning it up ahead of the Olympics last summer. Several athletes did get sick after swimming in it last year, but it's unclear if the water quality itself was to blame. Either way, Paris city officials have given the green light to dive right in, saying the water quality is in line with European regulations. And number 5, Joey Chestnut reclaiming his crown today at Nathan's annual hot dog eating contest right here in New York. The 41-year-old champion came in first place after downing, ready? 70.5 hot dogs in 10 minutes. That is just shy of his record 76 hot dogs. It's Chestnut's 17th win over his 20 appearances at the July 4th competition. We want to get back to our other top story tonight, the catastrophic flooding sweeping through central Texas, killing at least 6 people with at least 20 children missing after being swept away at a summer camp. We have NBC's Bill Caron standing by to give us the latest on the forecast. Bill, talk to us about how we got here and what you were watching in the hours and days ahead.
Yeah, Ellison, this was just, the setup was just horrific, and the location where it happened and the people that were involved in it. I mean, all of the elements just combined together for this horrific tragedy. And knowing that there's 20 girls missing from a camp, my daughter's at summer camp, I can't even imagine what these families are thinking and doing. And, you know, you're 2 hours away and you're rushing there and they're telling you to stay away. But how can you stay away if you know your daughter is missing and possibly clinging in a tree to life, hopefully? So I think we're still just at the tip of the iceberg of seeing just how horrific this story is going to get in the days ahead, because it was a 29-foot wall of water that came down what was pretty much a dry creek bed. I mean, if you talk to people what this looked like, see the pictures next to me. I mean, this looks like, you know, one of the bigger rivers you'll see in our country. You could almost walk across this with no problem 24 hours ago. And this river was at 3 feet deep, so you could wade across it yesterday morning or even early this morning. But then as that storm dumped a foot of rain over a large area, this water just accelerated down through the Guadalupe River. And that's how we got to where we are now, with a 29 feet river rise is insane in 1 hour. In 1 hour. That's a tsunami. That's all. They were calling it a wave. They didn't know what else to call it. And it's still going down the river. It hasn't even headed into Canyon Lake yet, where they should be able to absorb it. Right now, Canyon Lake is down by about 40 feet where it should be. So this is going to fill the lake back up. You know, so this is going to absorb it. That's why the dam was built there, for floods like this. But these areas upriver, this Comfort and this Kerrville, and all these camping locations and the girls' camp in between there, it's just horrific, Hallie, Ellison. And, you know, hopefully we can hear more rescues before it gets dark, because it is starting to get late.
All right, Bill Cairns, thank you for putting that all into perspective for us and keeping us updated on the very latest. We appreciate you. And thank you at home for watching. That is a wrap for this hour. Stay right there. More coverage picks up right now.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or watch live on our YouTube channel.